They say that there are some places you just shouldn't go, and tucked away in the foothills of the Himalayas is one such place. It's an old graveyard, small, desolate, and forgotten by all but a few. No one ever visited it during the day, but they were especially careful never to go there after dark. See, the locals said the keeper of the graveyard, an old man who goes by the name of Karim, had a strange habit. He would come out in the middle of the night and dig up graves. And the scariest part is that he did this even when nobody had died. The question is, why would anyone want to do that? And before we find out the answer, let me introduce you to our protagonist, a young man who lives in a nearby village. Imran was a curious person. In fact, some people even called him too inquisitive for his own good. See, he heard the stories about the gravedigger and the haunted graveyard, but he never believed them. He thought they were just superstitious nonsense made up to scare children. Then, one day, while passing through the village, he met an old friend of his, a man who also lived in the village but whom Imran hadn't seen in many years. They caught up for a bit, and over time, Imran learned that his friend had gone through a lot in the last few years. He'd lost his job, his house, and pretty much everything else that mattered to him. Eventually, he was left with nothing but his memories and his clothes on his back. So Imran took pity on him and invited him to stay at his house. His friend accepted, and he stayed for a week, eating what Imran had and sleeping on the floor. But before he left, he told Imran something that piqued his interest. He told him about how he and a few other men had once gone hunting rabbits in the hills. They hadn't brought any food with them, so they decided to steal some goats from a nearby village. As they crept around looking for a goat to take, they heard a noise and startled them. Startled, they ran away, not stopping until they were far away from the village. When they finally stopped and looked back, they realized that they had no idea which way the village was. They were totally lost. Luckily, they soon came across a man who lived in a hut. He offered them some food and water and helped them start a fire. And then, when it was time for them to leave, he showed them the way back to the village. "I never understood what he was doing living out in the middle of nowhere," said Imran's friend. "It wasn't until I saw him again that I realized the truth. That man was the keeper of the graveyard, and he lured us out there to kill us." He told Imran how he and his friends had tried to defend themselves, but it was no use. In the end, only one of them survived, and that was because the others got distracted and he ran away. When his friend finished the story, Imran felt a chill down his spine, but he still didn't believe him. That was until he heard more stories from other people about what happened at the graveyard. Each story was more horrifying than the last. It wasn't enough to convince him, though. He wanted proof. So he made a plan. The next time he passed by the graveyard, he parked his bike a few hundred meters away and walked to the graveyard, hiding behind some trees near the entrance. He waited there for hours, but nobody came. Just as he was about to leave, though, he saw a shadowy figure emerge from behind the tombs. It was the old man, Karim. Without wasting any time, Karim went to the center of the graveyard and pulled out a shovel from seemingly nowhere. He started digging a hole, and Imran watched him intently. After he was done, he put the shovel back and returned home. Imran couldn't sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he imagined himself being buried alive. Finally, when the sun came up, he got out of bed and went straight to the graveyard. He found the grave that Karim had dug and looked inside, but it was empty. Still, he couldn't shake off the feeling that something bad was going to happen to him. Later that week, he tried to convince a friend of his to go with him to spy on the graveyard, but his friend refused, warning him to stay away. Did he listen? Of course not. He went to the graveyard alone that night. He hid behind the same trees he had before, waiting for hours. Around midnight, he heard the sound of footsteps and he peeked through the trees to see Karim coming towards the gate. He entered the graveyard and Imran followed him. Karim headed to the same spot where he had dug the grave earlier, and Imran hid behind some tombstones. This time, he brought a flashlight with him so that if he needed to run away, he could see where he was going. As he watched Karim, he noticed something strange. The old man had his lips moving like he was chanting something. The sound was too low for Imran to make out what he was saying. Suddenly, the ground began to shake and Imran's heart skipped a beat. Was the earth moving on its own, or was someone digging underneath it? Whatever it was, he knew he should get away. He turned to leave, but that's when the unthinkable happened. The ground split open and a pale hand shot out of it. Imran froze in terror as a gaunt face emerged from the grave. It was an emaciated corpse, its eyes glowing a faint green. Before Imran could react, Karim turned around and beckoned for him to come closer. "Another one joins us," he whispered in a voice that sounded strangely inhuman. The corpse shambled forward and stood behind him like a loyal guard. Imran couldn't help but gasp. The sound must have given him away because Karim whipped around, his face now twisted in a terrifying manner. "You shouldn't be here, boy," he hissed. "This graveyard belongs to them now." With that, dozens of graves around them began to open up. Skeletal hands clawed out of the earth, and one by one, the dead rose from their graves. They shuffled around, their eyes glowing the same eerie green as before. Some of them swayed back and forth, while others shambled in a certain direction. It seemed like they were following orders. Overcome with fear, Imran started running towards the gate. But as soon as he neared it, the ground beneath him shifted. The path he had taken suddenly led him back to the same spot. He tried another path, but the same thing happened. It was like the graveyard was keeping him prisoner. Panic started to set in, and he realized that he might be doomed. Then he turned around to face his doom. Karim was standing in front of him, his lantern light blazing brightly. All around him, the corpses were rising from the ground, their glowing eyes fixed on him. And in that moment, he knew he wouldn't make it out alive. The last thing he saw was Karim raising his arms in triumph as the corpses dragged him down into the soil. The next morning, the graveyard looked calm. The villagers came by to pay their respects to the newly buried Imran. They placed flowers on his grave and said a prayer. But what they didn't know was that it wasn't the only new grave in the graveyard. Later that night, when the moon was high in the sky, the ground split open and a skeletal hand clawed its way out. It was followed by Imran's lifeless face, his eyes glowing an eerie green. He stumbled out of the grave and joined the other corpses. Together, they shuffled towards the center of the graveyard where Karim stood waiting for them. He welcomed Imran back and told him how glad he was that he had joined them. Then he turned to the rest of the corpses and said it was time to start digging. And so they all got to work. Together, they exhumed all the graves, causing the ground to collapse in on itself. Soon enough, there was no trace of the graveyard. In fact, it was like it had never been there at all. The villagers say that sometimes at night they hear Imran's screams echoing from beneath the ground. But that's just a legend, right? Well, maybe, because the next day they found a brand new tombstone in the middle of what used to be the graveyard. On it was carved, Imran, 2001-2023.